I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what I am about to tell you could save you from one of the most stressful moments you will ever experience in retirement. Imagine this: you are sitting in a beautiful hotel room somewhere in Europe, or Asia, or visiting your grandchildren overseas. You have worked your whole life for this moment, this trip, this freedom. You pick up your phone to check your bank account, and your pension payment is not there, not reduced, not late, just gone. You are thousands of kilometers from home. You have bills to pay, a flight to catch, and the money you were counting on, the money you have received every single fortnight without fail for years, is simply not in your account. Your hands start shaking. You call your bank. They tell you the payment was not received. You call Centrelink. You wait on hold for 40 minutes, in a hotel room, overseas, on international call rates. And when someone finally answers, they tell you something that makes your heart sink completely. They say, "You have been overseas for more than 6 weeks. Your payment has been adjusted." Nobody told you this would happen. Not when you applied for the pension, not in any letter Centrelink ever sent you, not in any conversation you ever had with anyone at Services Australia. You just found out, in a hotel room, thousands of kilometres from home, when it was already too late to do anything about it. This is happening to Australian seniors every single week. Real people, real trips, real panic, real money missing from real bank accounts, and every single time, the senior says the exact same thing afterwards. Why did nobody tell me? That is why I am making this video today, because the rule that caused this, the 6-week rule, is one of the most important rules in the entire Australian pension system for anyone who travels, and most pensioners have never heard of it. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what the 6-week rule is, what happens to your pension when you cross it, what changes Centrelink never warns you about, and what you must do before you book your next overseas trip to make sure this never happens to you. This is Australia Pension Hub. Let us get into it. Let me start with the rule that most Australian pensioners have never heard of, the 6-week rule. When you receive the age pension and you travel overseas, your payment does not immediately change. For the first 6 weeks you are outside Australia, your full pension payment continues. Everything stays the same. The base rate, the supplements, all of it. 6 weeks of normal payment, no questions asked. But the moment you cross that 6-week threshold, things change significantly, and the changes happen automatically, without a warning letter, without a phone call, without any notification from Centrelink that it is about to happen. Here is exactly what changes after 6 weeks overseas. First, the pension supplement reduces. The full pension supplement we see, which is currently part of your total fortnightly payment, reduces to the basic amount only. The additional component disappears. Second, the energy supplement stops entirely. From day 43 onwards, the energy supplement that was part of every fortnightly payment simply ceases. Gone. No warning, no letter, just gone. Third, your Pensioner Concession Card is cancelled, even if you are only temporarily overseas. Even if you are coming back in 3 days, your Pensioner Concession Card cancels after 6 weeks overseas. And here is what that means when you come home. You cannot use your Pensioner Concession Card at the pharmacy. You cannot access your energy concessions. You cannot use your transport concessions until a new card is issued, which takes time. The total impact of these 3 changes for a single pensioner can mean a reduction of over $60 per fortnight from the total payment they were receiving before they left Australia. For someone who planned their travel budget based on their normal pension payment, that reduction can be the difference between a comfortable trip home and a genuinely stressful financial scramble. Now let me explain the second layer, because the 6-week rule is only the beginning. What happens if you stay overseas for more than 26 weeks, more than 6 months? This is where the rules become significantly more complex and where the financial impact becomes significantly more serious. After 26 weeks outside Australia, your age pension payment is recalculated based on something called your Australian working life residence. This is the number of years you lived in Australia between the ages of 16 and 67. To receive the full pension rate while living overseas long-term, you need 35 years of Australian working life residence. If you have less than 35 years, your overseas pension payment is proportionally reduced, calculated on a descending scale based on how many years short of 35 you are. So a senior who has 28 years of Australian working life residence, who moves to live with family overseas receives only 28/35 of the pension rate they would receive in Australia, not the full amount, a proportional amount. And this calculation applies regardless of how long you have been receiving the pension in Australia, regardless of how many years you paid taxes, regardless of how much you contributed to this country. It is based purely on the years of residence between 16 and 67. For many Australian seniors, particularly those who immigrated to Australia as adults, this calculation produces a result that genuinely shocks them, because they have been receiving the full pension in Australia for years, and they assume that full rate travels with them. It does not. Now let me talk about something that catches people off guard in a specific and expensive way, people who arrived in Australia as adults. If you arrived in Australia in your 30s or 40s and you became an Australian resident and eventually qualified for the age pension, your Australian working life residence years are limited by when you arrived. Someone who arrived at age 40 and retired at age 67 has a maximum of 27 years of Australian working life residence, no matter how long they live in Australia after that, no matter how many years they receive the pension. For that person, if they travel overseas for more than 26 weeks, their pension reduces to 27/35 of the standard rate, not the full amount, ever, while overseas. Many migrants who arrived in Australia as adults and who now receive the age pension are not aware of this. They assume their pension is fully portable because they have been living in Australia and receiving the pension for years. But the portability calculation goes back to working life residence, not recent residence. Now let me address the notification question, because this is where most people make their most expensive mistake. Many seniors believe that as long as they notify Centrelink before they travel, they are protected from unexpected payment changes. That notification somehow freezes their payment or provides additional protection. That is not how it works. Notifying Centrelink before you travel is legally required. You must tell Centrelink if you are leaving Australia for 6 weeks or more. But notification does not change the rules. The 6-week threshold still applies. The supplement reductions still happen. The Pensioner Concession Card still cancels. What notification does protect you from is the overpayment trap. If you do not notify Centrelink and you stay more than 6 weeks overseas, Centrelink may not adjust your payment correctly during that time. You may receive more than you are entitled to, and when they discover you were overseas, they will calculate the overpayment and ask for it back. With interest in some cases, if you do notify, your payment adjusts correctly based on the rules. You do not come home to a debt letter, so notify. Always, before you go, not from overseas, not when you get back, before you leave. But notify understanding that it does not change what happens. It simply ensures the right rules are applied correctly. Now let me talk about coming back to Australia after a long period overseas. This is the trap that catches the most people by surprise, and it is the one that creates the longest lasting financial consequences. If you have been living overseas for an extended period and you return to Australia, you do not immediately resume receiving the full pension at the Australian rate. There is a 2-year waiting period. You must live in Australia continuously for 2 years after resuming residency before your age pension becomes fully portable again. If you leave Australia again before those 2 years have passed, your payment can be stopped or significantly reduced, and the exceptions to this rule are extremely narrow. They do not include holidays. They do not include compassionate travel to visit sick family members overseas. This catches seniors who move overseas to live with children or grandchildren for a year or two, and then return to Australia thinking everything will go back to normal immediately. It does not. The 2-year clock starts again from the day you return. Now let me talk about international social security agreements, because for some Australian pensioners, these agreements change the picture significantly. Australia has social security agreements with a number of countries. These agreements allow residents of those countries to count their working life residence in both countries when calculating pension entitlements, which means seniors who lived and worked in both Australia and a partner country may be able to access better pension outcomes under the agreement than they would under standard Australian rules alone. Countries that have social security agreements with Australia include the United Kingdom, the United States, New Zealand, Germany, Italy, Greece, the Netherlands, Ireland and others. If you spent significant working years in any country that has a social security agreement with Australia and you are now receiving the age pension, it is worth understanding how that agreement might affect your entitlements when travelling or living in that partner country. This is complex territory. The specific terms of each agreement differ, and the interaction between Australian pension rules and the agreement rules requires professional advice to navigate correctly. But the key point is this: if you have a connection to one of these countries, do not assume the standard portability rules are the only rules that apply to you. You may have options that most Australian pensioners do not. Now let me also quickly address the New Zealand situation, because it is specific and it catches people off guard. New Zealand has a social security agreement with Australia, but the rules around how Australian age pension payments are affected by travel to New Zealand are different from travel to other countries. Your payments may change from the date you arrive in New Zealand, not from the date you have been there for 6 weeks. The agreement affects the timing and the calculation differently from the standard portability rules. If you are planning an extended stay in New Zealand, speak with Centrelink before you go. Do not assume the standard 6-week rule is the only rule that applies. The New Zealand agreement has specific provisions that operate differently, and finding out about them after you arrive is significantly more stressful than knowing about them before you leave. Now let me bring everything together in one clear action plan before we finish. Action 1. Know the 6-week rule before you book any overseas trip. If your trip is going to be longer than 6 weeks, understand exactly what changes to your payment on day 43. Calculate the impact, know what your reduced payment will look like, and make sure your travel budget accounts for it. Action 2. Notify Centrelink before you leave. If your trip is 6 weeks or longer, you are legally required to notify. Do it before you go, through MyGov or by calling Centrelink directly, and update them if your plans change while you are overseas. Action 3. If you are planning an extended overseas stay of more than 6 months, get professional advice before you go. The Australian Working Life Residence calculation and the proportional payment rules are complex. Understanding how they apply to your specific situation is essential before you make any decisions. Action 4. Plan for the Pensioner Concession Card cancellation. If your trip is longer than 6 weeks, your card will cancel. Fill any prescriptions you need before you leave, and when you return, contact Centrelink immediately to have your card reissued. Action 5. If you have connections to a country that has a social security agreement with Australia, or if you are planning an extended stay in New Zealand, speak with Centrelink specifically about how the agreement rules apply to your situation before you travel. Action 6. If you have been living overseas and you are returning to Australia, understand the 2-year portability waiting period. Do not plan any overseas travel within those 2 years without understanding what it will do to your payment. My friend Helen, who I mentioned at the start of this story, she sorted everything out when she got home. Her Pensioner Concession Card was reissued. Her payment was adjusted back to the full rate. Centrelink confirmed she had not created an overpayment issue because she had been away for less than 3 months. Everything went back to normal. But those final 3 days in Venice, sitting in a hotel room checking her bank account, counting what she had left on her credit card, wondering whether she had enough to get home comfortably, those 3 days were not the ending she imagined when she booked the trip of a lifetime. She called me when she got home and said, "I would have done the exact same trip. I just would have planned my money completely differently if I had known about the 6-week rule." That is what preparation does. It does not stop you from traveling. It does not change the rules. It does not take away your freedom in retirement. It just means you are not the person sitting in a hotel room overseas wondering where your pension went. Know the rules before you go, travel confidently, and come home without a Centrelink problem waiting for you. Share this with every senior you know who is planning an overseas trip. Because the 6-week rule is real, it is already being applied. And most Australian pensioners who cross that threshold find out about it the same way Helen did. Drop a comment and tell us, did you know about the 6-week rule before watching this? And have you ever been caught by it overseas? We read every single one. See you in the next one.